Welcome back to Rominger Radio. Carl Rominger here answering all your questions. 717-916-5189. This will be part 2 of our Sunday evening show. Hopefully we're ready to go. So give us a call, 717-916-5189, and we'll get you here on the air. Again, 717-916-5189. We'll get you live on the air. Again, and we've been talking to a very interesting group of gentlemen with a lot of religious topics tonight, but we've been going over, do dogs get into heaven? Well, I think it degenerated into is there heaven, and what do religious beliefs really mean? We were joined by a real bona fide living atheist who had quite a bit of interesting things to say. Her name is Brian, and of course Chris was with us, and I expect those guys may be back here shortly now that they know that we're going to go back on the air. So if you get a chance, pick up your phone, 717-916-5189, and let's see, we'll get the first guy here. Answering, I hope. Well, come on, Skype. What? I don't want to let me answer? I don't know what's going on with our tech tonight, folks. I really doubt. All right. Chris, can you hear me? Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Can you hear me? No? Can you hear me? Chris?
I can hear you, Carl.
Okay, good. You're live on the air. So,
all right. Is Brian there, or is he still off?
I think Brian's still off. So we shall see. All right. Well, anyhow, what I did during that little break there was rewire some internet around. So you're actually coming in on an AT&T pipe through my handheld, and Spreaker is going out over Comcast. So we'll lower the internet load, and hopefully that'll stop the disruptions. But I really think something's going on in the atmosphere. I really like to blame God. So anyhow.
Okay.
Anyhow, you tell me what's going on here.
Well, I think it's probably the NSA and Snowden's doing it from Russia. But anyway, what I wanted to say was, and maybe Brian can hear me, I don't know, is, we probably disagree on a lot with religious things in our beliefs, but I would say that we probably agree on the Establishment Clause, which we know is in the Constitution. It's pretty clear, right? It calls for protections for everybody to be able to worship their personal religion, and then it also calls for the government not to make an establishment or endorse any one religion. So there's a balancing act. I think it's a good idea, and I'm sure Brian's group supports it. I just don't know why more Christian pastors and denominations don't endorse it and accept it. You know what I mean?
Okay, so let's start with a couple precepts. It's threatening to anyone, I guess, that maybe that their beliefs are being questioned, or that their belief somehow isn't the best, or that to acknowledge. Right. So to acknowledge that a secular ideal such as the Establishment Clause is good for religion requires you to acknowledge that accepting something that allows other religions to have the same footing as yours, I think is inherently threatening at one level. There's also a myth in America that America is a Christian nation. If America was a Christian nation, the Founding Fathers simply would not have put the Establishment Clause in there. In other words, if it were a simple, and this may be astounding to some people listening, and if you disagree with me, prove me wrong, call me in at 717-916-5189. I'll take you on this one.
Carl, the pushback I heard from somebody at Messiah once was that the reason the founding fathers put that in is they meant don't endorse any one denomination. So they're assuming everybody's Christian, but we shouldn't endorse any one denomination within Christianity.
Which is a really great argument to make if it were supported by the historical evidence. But the historical evidence is that in the creation of the Establishment Clause, they discussed the Muhammads, which is what they called the Muslims in those days. They discussed the Jews. In other words, the actual discussion that was had was more than just one Christian denomination versus the other, although clearly that was on everybody's mind because you have the Church of England, and then you had the Catholic Church, where very distinctly different denominations and created for very distinctly different purposes. And you had, but my point is that if you read back and go through the discussions and the letters back and forth between these guys and the debates they had, they clearly reference the Jews and the Muslims and other religious sects that existed, as well as the Christian sect. If you actually would travel back in time a few hundred years, you discover that ports like Philadelphia and other areas were very cosmopolitan and actually had people from all different cultures wandering around them. So to think of America as just a bunch of, various Christian denominations would be far from the truth. But again, it's part of this. It's part of the way that the world's been rewritten. And so one of my favorite paintings is in the Capitol Dome, and it's the Apatheus of Washington. And it's basically means Washington ascending to godhood. And that was painted before the 1860s, okay? Because what happened when the mid-1800s was the Reformation swept America, and the brimstone preachers and this very simplified version of American Christianity burnt through the Midwest and the South, and you had the Chautauquas and the tent meetings, and a very fundamentalistic bent was taken up. But prior to that, American Christians were probably more like some Christians would today claim to be, more cosmopolitan, more like, well, I'm not, just because I'm Catholic, it doesn't mean I believe all Protestants go to hell, and I don't necessarily think that all Buddhists go to hell either, or I don't think anybody goes to hell. That was probably more closer to the more cosmopolitan beliefs they had. But my point is, so let's assume that your friend at Messiah was wrong, and that, or a teacher or whoever, that they missed one little point there on the Establishment Clause, which is it was put in there because they recognized that any religion was a problem. But Christians want to take credit for this country. They somehow believe that Christianity was the key. Well, guess what? Britain was a Christian nation. France was a Christian nation.
Well,
Spain was a Christian nation. I mean,
what they really want to do is they want to make the laws of Christianity or their church the laws of the land. And I think the danger in that is, what countries are a theocracy? Well, Iran is, right?
Right.
A lot of Middle Eastern countries, Saudi Arabia is, right? And you really don't have any freedom then, because the minority or one person's views, they're going to force them down your throat, right? And they're going to say, well, Carl, you're a fornicator, and that's a crime, so and adultery is a crime, and you get stoned to death.
They're going to chop my weenie off.
Exactly. Imagine if you were, instead of representing divorce cases, if you had an adulterer client, you'd be trying to save them from the death penalty, right?
And Bill Clinton wouldn't have survived the week over there.
Yeah, Bill Clinton would have been toasted, and the Republicans would have been happy, and they wouldn't have been able to do an impeachment, though.
Of course, when Laura Bush had that accident and ran that guy over, they probably would have stoned her to death. And when George Bush did the coke, they would have stoned him to death. And
anybody who kisses in public would be sentenced to jail. Well, so we got a lot of people. You guys would be in business in criminal defense.
Keeping in mind that I'm not actively practicing as a lawyer anymore.
I know. I forgot that. Well, criminal defense attorneys would be, they'd be raking in big bucks. But the irony is, you got all these people, they want to make, like Rick Santorum, God bless him, disagree with the guy 110%. I believe he's totally sincere. But if Rick had his way, I don't think we'd have a lot of happy people, and a lot of people would leave the Republican Party once they got a taste of all that. Birth control, you wouldn't be able to buy it because Rick doesn't want it to be legal.
I just saw Santorum. I just saw Santorum was in the news saying that gay marriage, is bad.
It breaks down the family, and they have an agenda, and all that.
The purpose of marriage is for raising of a family and procreation, which begs the question then, if a 50-year-old man and a 55-year-old woman who is postmenopausal, want to get married, and neither one has a child. Why are they allowed to get married? They're incapable of producing a child.
Right.
What is the purpose
exactly.
of their
That's a good point.
of their
That's
marriage?
A good point.
Well, they're a man and they're a woman. That's what, and so that's okay with Rick. But if he wants to be,
I guess I'd ask Rick, why are you so bothered if gay people marry? Why are you so mad about that?
Now, I'll take you back though. I actually worked for Rick Santorum when I was in college on his campaign. I was the president of the Allegheny Republicans my senior year. And it was a big election year. It was a year that Santorum won Senate and Ridge won
He
governor.
was a little more moderate, though, back then, wasn't he?
But let me explain something about this. So now when I graduated from law school, he was the keynote speaker that year, 98, okay? And
right.
I chit-chatted with him afterwards. I was wandering around smoking a cigar, and I bumped into him. I'm just puffing on my cigar, and I'm talking to him. And he said, I said something, and he goes, I just vote my beliefs. And he goes, my way of belief, my belief structure is I'm going to do what I think is right, and I will always vote my conscience. And if I have no opinion on the issue, then the only other thing to look at is what my constituency wants. He's like, but if I have an opinion on the issue or a belief in the area, I'm going to vote that. And as long as I'm representing my constituency, I'll get voted back into office. And someday, when I vote my conscience and continue to do it the way I do it, I'll be voted out when I no longer represent the constituents because they don't believe in the same things I do. But I'm not going to change what I feel or believe to match what will get me votes. I think I was elected in because people believe in what I believe in, and it may change, but I'm not going to change. And he really is sincere that way. I mean, that man.
Oh yeah, I believe he's sincere. What he says he believes in, he actually does.
He just like in Dr. Strangelove, man. He rode that bomb right down into the ground when he got booted out in that one election. He didn't change. He didn't compromise. He didn't soften his stance. He didn't do anything. He was just Rick Santorum. So one thing I like about him is, and this is a Western Pennsylvania ideal, I think, is he just believes I'm going to vote the way I believe I should vote. So it reminds me of the Chinese. You have the favor of heaven while you're in power, and then when you're finally knocked out of power, we now know you no longer have the favor of heaven. Well, that's Rick Santorum. So in defense of him, I disagree with a lot of the stuff he believes, but I will say there's no doubt that man believes it sincerely. His version of conservatism is not designed to get votes. Now, in the meantime, we've got large portions of the Republican Party pretending to be conservatives because they've discovered that may be what works.
I would say my pushback against Rick would be he lived in Virginia when he represented Pennsylvania. He had $1 million mansion, which, okay, he did well, but I think you should live in the state you represent. And secondly, when he was elected, he supported like the Medicare, the Part D prescription expansion, a lot of the government stuff, that Bush wanted and got through.
Right.
He's not really a libertarian conservative,
No, not by any stretch of the imagination. In fact, a lot of my conservative friends, I don't always think are really conservative because they don't seem to actually understand the concept of small government and low taxes if it involves imprisoning people, if it involves blowing things up, if it involves anything that they think is important for government to do, then it doesn't matter how much frickin' money you spend.
Now, speaking of religion, and because we're dealing with it now, with this whole thing in Iraq, a lot of people were blaming the president and saying that he didn't, he mishandled it, right? But what you're seeing now in Iraq is that they basically, the head of the Shias, the al-Sadr or whatever his name is,
yes,
he basically said if Americans come back, he'll try to kill all of them, right? Now, how ungrateful is that to a country that helped liberate the country from Saddam and help build it? We may not have been perfect and we probably shouldn't have went in there, but there's that whole religious undertones. Everybody's trying to kill each other. And I guess the thing I can't understand from Republicans is that Bush signed that status of forces agreement that called for everybody to leave in 2011, right?
Right.
The president tried to renegotiate it. they couldn't get immunity for generals and commanders in the field, so I don't think the military wanted to sign anything then without that, right? But a lot of these neocons have said, well, you know, yeah, we wanted to leave in 2011, but they should have tried to renegotiate something before that, meaning they said a long time ago we were going to leave, but I think people really wanted to, in the end, stay forever. Some people wanted to stay there forever, you know?
Yeah, and my issue with Obama getting crap over this whole thing is he simply did what Bush negotiated, and the new problem now it's he didn't renegotiate what we negotiated. Well, if you were so prescient, you wouldn't have agreed to a date, or you were lying knowing that you were going to try to renegotiate. You know, in other words, you were lying knowing that you didn't intend to honor that date. So,
but doesn't it bother you? And I mean, on Fox News, they've been running all the attack ads and everything like what we expected, but. I mean, I think the president should do airstrikes. I think he should send advisors. I would send probably 1,000 or 2 special forces. But I think the genius in what the president's doing is he's trying to push the country to defend themselves. And some of them now are rallying in Baghdad. But the problem is, even if they somehow hold off these Muslim militants, you still have 3 separate sects of Islamic people, the Sunnis, Kurds, and Shiites. And the Shiites, you know, kept everybody out to begin with. That's why they have this problem, you know. So there's the whole religion thing. And,
so are you tying this back to the Establishment Clause ideal?
Yeah, I think so. I think the problem is in countries like that, they don't have something like the Establishment Clause, and the Sunnis were really disenfranchised, and then they got mad, you know. And they lost rights. They were shut out, you know.
And I would say, yeah, that I agree with you. I mean, in my humble personal opinion, exactly what we're dealing with is what happens when countries pick one religion over the other. It fractionalizes a country. You know, that was what the Civil War was all about. Was where the states. In a federal system where the state's free to pull out of it, so to speak, you know, and right. Recognizing that states will have divergent interests and divergent needs, but that, you know, going back to that picture of the snake chopped into 13 pieces, you know, united we stand, divided we fall. The idea being that you need this cohesion at some level to create this strong structure to survive in the world. Well, I think the forefathers, the constitutional fathers, and they were fathers, there were no mothers, They got together and looked at the world and said, you know, religion can be divisive. And while it certainly can be rallying, if the country picks a sect or if the country picks a version of religion, and that will eventually become another fracturing point. And we don't need additional reasons to fracture the country. Or to push people apart, and I think they knew that even in that day and age.
I think they did too. I think they were pretty much on the mark, you know.
And I sometimes think that the problem people have in acknowledging that is you have to again acknowledge that they realized that Christianity was not magical.
Or it wasn't the only acceptable religion, and for some people they can't accept that premise.
Right. Well, it's very threatening again. And then you have to talk about, I mean, what you're taught. You know, when I grew up as a kid and I went to church. They didn't have nice things to say. You know, we were told that Mormons were going to hell. They were very suspicious of Catholics, you know. I mean, they basically told us in Sunday school it's real questionable whether Catholics are going to heaven or not. You know, that
I grew up United Methodist, and they actually believe in the separation of church and state and protecting minority religions.
Right.
So they actually are pretty fair then in that sense.
Well, yeah, know? But yeah, I'm just saying my church that I grew up in as a kid was pretty clear that they basically.
Oh yeah, I know. Some churches they're against everybody else.
They were basically said that the typical the Catholics don't really accept Christ the same way a Protestant does. Therefore, unless a Catholic like goes above and beyond the normal church teachings, they're not going to heaven. I mean, you know, my joke about it is that in that tiny church with 100 members in the middle of Western New York, you know, it was them and 1,000 other people who were scattered around the world who were God's chosen people going to heaven because everybody else had something wrong with them.
Yeah.
But
well, we aren't in hell yet, Carl.
Well, I'm working my way there. Trust me.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, at least want to have. I want to go out with a bang.
Yeah.
So I'm just trying to think what other. So let's just change topics for a minute because I want your take on this. How about? And by the way, 717-916-5189 if you want to get on the air here and jump in for part 2 of the Sunday night broadcast here. What do you think about Lois Lerner's emails disappearing? You think it's coincidence or do you smell something rotten?
Well, it's hard to say. I think first of all, the Republicans made the mistake of labeling everything a conspiracy, right? Like with Benghazi and all this stuff. And with the Lois Lerner thing, from what I read, like on the Huffington Post, they were targeting progressive groups as well as conservative groups, not just conservative groups. I think it's definitely suspicious that emails disappeared. I think it'll definitely fuel the fire and keep the story going. There's no doubt about it. But I think in a sense, to the average person, I think that the news outlets and the conservatives overextended their hand because they've been calling every single thing a conspiracy. It's kind of now like the boy that cried wolf. I don't know if people really believe them anymore if you're not a conservative, Now, if I talk to my uncle, of course he thinks that they deleted the emails and Obama did it, right? But he's going to believe that anyway, right? I'm talking about people in the middle,
That's why I'm most interested in, and I'll tell you, the thing that I put the strongest stock in is them going ahead and, what do I want to say? Them going ahead and saying to the White House 2 months ahead of time that this is what happened. In other words, why is the White House learning about it before Congress does 2 months ahead of time when the IRS has already engaged actively with Congress in this investigation? To me, that's the only ratty part of the whole thing. To me, if it was just coincidence, good, just run right to Congress and say, as of today, I just learned we're not going to be able to get you all the emails. Instead, they went to the White House and some other executive offices and said, hey, by the way, there's 2 months or 2 years of missing emails here. Why tell them except to give them time to make sure that those emails never come to light?
And I think I don't know what happened. I'm not a computer IT expert. I heard people on the Hannity show saying that even if they deleted this stuff, it could somehow be recovered with the backups. And if they're gone, then it would be too much of a coincidence that you could almost prove that someone purposely deleted it all.
Yeah, and and let me just take you up to another level of sophistication, right? If you're going to burn some evidence, if you decide you need to, burn a hard drive, right, and destroy a bunch of stuff, how hard is it to send an email that says, "Hey, my hard drive crashed. Is there any way you guys can recover this stuff?" And then you send the hard drive off to some guy somewhere who checks a box that says nothing can be recovered, and then you dump the radio. I mean, how hard would that be?
Yeah.
We got us another caller here, Chris. Caller, what's your name and where are you from?
Hi, Amanda from Ephrata.
Hey, welcome to the show. You're on with
Thank you.
Carl. We got Chris here. What's going on?
Well, I was just thinking we were talking about the Lois Lerner, everything going on.
Yes.
Yes, and doesn't it seem a little weird that it just happened they were recycling their hard drive when it was exactly the exact emails that they wanted to have, but everything else was the same?
Yeah, see, that's where I think it's weird. There's just enough of a weird patina to the whole thing. Now, listen, I can't prove, this is just like this God conversation we had earlier. I can't prove God exists.
Exactly.
I can't prove he does. I mean, I can't absolutely prove that. But what did Brian say, the atheist earlier? Brian, or non-believer, we'll call him. Brian said, well, I just want some evidence, some positive evidence of something. And there's at least enough here for that, like the timing and the quantity. And then to me, the delay in reporting. If you're actively, it would be one thing if the IRS said, well, we didn't mention it to Congress because they weren't talking to us about this stuff. But they came and said, we're going to give you all the emails. And then we find out they've known for a long time they didn't have this stuff. And they've told the White House, but they just sort of somehow didn't mention it to Congress. And had not the Senate committee investigating it decided to simply ask the IRS commissioner to certify that he had provided everything, that was requested.
And
That's
also,
when he suddenly
and
said,
they had
"Oops."
an email backup service. They had, I think it's called Sonasoft.com.
Right.
They had an email backup service for how many years?
And
So like 2009.
And the other thing you need to know is, and I mean really, if her hard drive crashed, I just set up a Microsoft Exchange server where I work, okay? And I've got everybody's Outlook talking to it and everything. Well, it keeps there's a server-based copy, and then there's local copies of everything. So if she really sent an email on like Monday that said, "Oh my gosh, my hard drive crashed," they would at least have all the immediate emails for 6 months, because the IRS is saying we only had a 6-month backup system. Well, they could have taken a 6-month snapshot instantly and had all of them anyhow. So they should at least have a full 6 months, even based on their own story. But they don't have it.
Right, and if I was audited and I didn't have like a couple of receipts, do you know what they would do to me?
Well, I think that part's funny. Right,
Yeah.
right. We just, we misplaced.
I think another point, and I think when I watch Daryl Ice on TV, I think one thing that he's misrepresenting is he's portraying this that it was only conservative groups that were targeted by the IRS, if you believe that's true, and that's not true. They went after both liberal and conservative groups. And some of the reasoning that they got into that kind of behavior is because the IRS code is what some people might argue in the gray area about, people that are nonprofits or 501(c)(3)s doing political activity, right?
Yeah, but I tell you, with the letters that we saw going from Democratic senators to the IRS, and with the conversations that we know were going on with the head of the IRS making all these trips to the White House, there's more to this. I'm just telling you my gut again. Okay, now I'm back into the belief structure, right? My gut is there's too much here to simply say nothing happened.
That's what I think.
And Lois Lerner, by the way, was a political hack. I mean, she was not there because she wasn't absolutely loyal to the Democratic cause. I mean, she's a foot soldier in the Democratic Party for many years, and so it isn't like this was just some bureaucrat with no strong party leanings. I mean, she was the person you put somewhere who you can trust to get done what you need to get done. Listen, if I want you to do something bad for me, okay, and I'm a politician, I'm probably not going to sit down with you and ask you to do something bad for me. I'm going to sit down with you and say, "Hey, you got my back?" And you're going to be like, "Yeah, I got your back." And I picked you because you're smart enough to know what nefarious things I need you to do without me having to have a conversation. I mean, that's how it's done.
Well, that's the whole point. Then it never leads back to the higher up.
Right, because you never ordered it.
Exactly.
If you have to order it, then you've appointed the wrong person.
Well, and I think another thing in the media, when I watch Fox News, I see a lot of the IRS, that story. And when I watch MSNBC, I see a lot of the Chris Christie bridge cover-up story. And then when I watch each station, I never see the opposite.
Yeah.
So you can kind of, depending what you watch, you're going to see different news going on, right?
There's no doubt about it. Well, Fox and MSNBC have clearly staked out opposite ends of the spectrum, and we should never lose sight of.
You got to admit, Carl, if you're saying what you're saying about Lois Lerner, but when somebody sends an email and they say it's time for some traffic problems in Fort Lee, it doesn't get any more blatant than that.
No, I think Christie's dirty as the day is long. But
and I liked Christie before all that happened. To be honest, I actually did like Christie.
So what's going on down there?
I got
right, Chris.
jet. I got to eat, Carl. So
all right, go eat dinner.
If Brian ever comes back, ask him about the Establishment Clause and all that.
I will. All right, Chris. Thanks.
All right.
Thank you, Carl.
Hey,
tell us what's going on in Ephrata right now. Anything exciting down there? Anything we need to know?
It's Ephrata, really.
It's Ephrata. It's just the turnpike still runs beside it.
Yes, sir.
And
but thank you. I really enjoy your program.
Oh, well, thank you for listening. We need as many listeners as we can possibly dig up, so feel free to share it.
All right. Well, thank you for taking my call tonight.
No, my pleasure. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye. Yeah, if we get cute girls on the air, we get as many as we can. 717-916-5189. If you're a cute girl or even not a cute girl, feel free to call in. 717-916-5189. and we'll discuss whatever is going on in the greater United States area, wherever that may be. By the way, I still continue to be proven correct about this World War III thing. Obama's just about got us in one, and the rest of the world's obliging by playing along. So just keep watching. The conflagration is going to come somewhere. But hey, what do I know? By the way, I do see on Twitter people getting all upset because the gun people, so like Gun Sense Vermont, she wears a shirt, to let you know that she's anti-gun. And then, of course, the joke is, advertise your vulnerability on a T-shirt. Like, yes, I'm an anti-gun person. Shoot me, rob me, because we all know that gun-free zones are where most crime occurs. Well, if you're your own miniature gun-free zone, well, you can expect that you might be where crime occurs. So, not recommended. Okay, lady, not recommended. I haven't been able to see the World Cup scores here. So somebody's going to have to chime in and tell me what's going on in the greater activity here as to what's actually going on. By the way, if you go to Spreaker.com, so if you follow the link on Spreaker and you sign up as a follower of my show, when I go live on a broadcast, it'll automatically be fed right to you. So, for instance, the other night when I was out at the bar with some very drunken, hippie, liberal individuals, they started talking all kinds of trash. So I said, well, let's put you guys live on the air right now. So we did like a little, 10-minute clip of them in their drunken revelry. And it's actually blasphemous to listen to, so I don't recommend it. But that's available in the historical section of the show here. But my point on this is you could have listened live to that because it would come right to your email and alert you that a live broadcast has started, or if we upload a new podcast, you get an email alerting you. So besides following on Facebook, if you go to Spreaker.com and follow the show, and just search Carl Rominger in the Spreaker interface, and if you do that, and you can use your Facebook as a login on Spreaker as well, by the way. If you do that, then every time we do something, it'll get fired right to your email, which isn't a bad thing because that way it's a little easier to keep track of when the show is starting, or if you've forgotten or you just haven't made it home yet. Also, Spreaker has a app you can download, and we have those on carlrominger.com. If you go to the front of carlrominger.com and you just scroll down the front of the main page on the right, we've got all of the Spreaker apps for your various iPhone, et cetera, and our shows are on iTunes as well. So if you're an iTunes user and you want to download the show to listen later, you can pull them right off of iTunes. The episodes go up in relatively real time on iTunes as well. So anyhow, I just want to tell you guys a little bit more, just so you know. So if you get the app, that's really cool, and then you can listen to Spreaker mobily, et cetera, and get the show streaming. But you don't really need that because you can just start it streaming anywhere else as well. And if you follow me on Spreaker and I got 99 followers there or something like that right now. If you're following it, you'll get these live alerts that the show's up and running. And I follow other people on Spreaker. So the other thing is there's a couple other really good shows out there, including some conservative talk. So you might want to look into that as well. And by the way, if anybody's aware of any radio outlets or anyone else who wants to simulcast or rebroadcast this material, we're happy to do that. 717-916-5189 if you want to get in on the talk before we wrap it up for the night. As you know, this show goes from 6 to 9 p.m., but that doesn't mean I'm always going to stay on the air until 9 p.m. It doesn't mean I'm going to quit at 9 p.m. So you never know exactly how long it's going to be. I'm not dying, to stay on the air tonight because I want to find out what happened in the World Cup. This religious conversation's been exhaustive. People on Facebook just went crazy about dogs in heaven. I'm just trying to figure out who says dogs don't go to heaven. Apparently, from Facebook, if I had to run a poll on Facebook, I would say 85% of everybody said dogs will be in heaven. It's interesting, all dogs get to go to heaven, but not all people. I guess there's a difference. I guess it would be better not to have free will then. It would be better not to be God's special creation, to just be one of God's many creations. I'd rather be a mollusk. I don't have to do anything. I just show up in heaven. Who we got here? Caller, you're on the air. Who we got and what city?
Lucinda, and I live in Mountjoy.
Ah, okay. Well, Is that close to
Is
that close to intercourse?
Yes. You're speaking of the town.
Yeah. Yes, the town.
Yeah.
Lancaster.
It's not. It's a little like half hour.
Like a half hour.
Like that.
Okay. It's closer to bird in hand, or
depends if you take your time. It could be longer. You know?
Yeah. All right. Anyhow, enough of those Lancaster. You know, the guy that named all the towns in Lancaster County either didn't know where the English language was headed, or knew where it was headed, and just thought, I'm going to have a lot of fun with this map.
There's a lot of weird names. Yeah, that's for sure.
Either that, or it was some poor, like I say, some guy who had no clue what he was up to. But I suspect the guy's like, hey, I'm going to drop some. Back in this day and age, you drop photo bombs. Back in those days, it's like cartographer bombs or something. So what's going on, Listen? You've been listening to all this?
I have. It was a really good show tonight. I really enjoyed the guys you had on in the beginning, and it's just interesting. I always like to listen to atheists just because I think I learn a lot. It doesn't never change my mind, but I think I learn a lot, and it was interesting. They had some good points.
I think Dawn Stevens jumped in with us too, Listen, I think.
Oh, hey, Carl.
Dawn, Lucinda wanted to say something
Yes,
intelligent, so before you drag the show into the gutter, let her finish her thoughts.
I know.
Okay, I thought I was listening to it live, but I may be a couple minutes behind.
Yeah, she's on right now. So let her finish. Let her finish, Dawn, and then we'll let you take us back to the gutter, okay?
I'm back to the gutter.
Yeah. Well, we were there once or twice earlier.
Oh, okay.
You missed the whole conversation.
Well, I missed the first half of the show. I'm very sorry.
You missed all the intercourse. All right. So, Lucinda, go ahead and tell us, pontificate before we have to hear from Don.
Oh my God! Now I'm nervous.
Yeah, he makes me nervous too.
I will tell you, Don. I do think that you have to re-listen. You have to listen to the beginning of the show because the show is really good tonight, and I think you would enjoy it too. Like I said a minute ago, I like listening to atheists. I like listening to religious points when people are talking about it like they did tonight, and it's a lot different than when you're reading it on Facebook and everyone gets kind of nasty. They're a little more civil to each other in FaceTime. And just talking about the lowest learner, going into that subject too, I don't think that there's one. If there's anybody that doubts that there's dishonesty going on there, whether we don't have any 100% proof, like you had said, Carl, but you'd have to be pretty sick to not to think that there's something going on there. Those are my two comments on the night.
Yeah, and one thing I like about Brian is, if nothing else, you can't say that he's just out there, with not making sense. In other words, I like the fact that he can quote the Bible faster than most of the quote I would say religious end quote people can. Which I think just shows that he's a strong debater, and he recognizes that he's going to have to support his opinion because it's going to be rejected out of hand a lot of the time. So I think he makes a great caller in that respect because he really knows his topics.
Amazing. And I just wanted to say all that he has all his like you said, quoting the Bible. He has all his stuff ready to go, and he's not condescending about it at all. And that's what I find in both sides of of any religious discussion, especially on, like I said, on Facebook. That people get so condescending and want to be so right. They have no room to kind of listen. And I would listen to him a bunch more.
Well, you could actually let him teach a Sunday school class, and except for the very end where he wraps it up, he would sound exactly like the teacher.
Yeah, well, that's true.
Right,
where
a wrap up, and he'd be like, and that's the end of the fairy tale, kids. Sorry, none of this is true.
And they all lived happily ever after until they died, and then there was nothing.
Right, then there was nothing. So, all right, go back to your parents now. So, Don, do you think dogs are going to heaven?
Do I think dogs are going to heaven?
Yes.
No.
You don't think there'd be little?
No, I really don't.
No little puppies in heaven.
My little puppies going.
Okay. Here's what I think. I think all living things are sentient beings. They're aware of their surroundings. A lot of them may have sophisticated brains enough to have emotions. May have feelings or thoughts. Maybe sort of like what we do.
What about chipmunks?
And that's part of being alive.
But is there something, when those biological systems fail, beyond that, I don't think there is.
What about cows?
I don't think there's any evidence for that.
What about cows? Can cows?
It's sad. I think we want to believe that those things are out there, but if you look at things rationally, you should realize that there is no evidence for it.
Right. Makes sense.
Hey, did you ever see that movie with Robin Williams called? Oh God, it's just out of my head now.
Dreams may pan out.
Yeah, what dreams may come.
What dreams may come, yes. And that's where everybody's version of heaven is basically their own version of heaven.
Right. And
that sounds like a lot of people posted on your, on the thread about that, was that it's their interpretation of what they want to believe.
Right, absolutely.
And I don't think that holds a lot of water in reality.
Well, and your interpretation is what you want to believe too, though. It's all in what we interpret. Every one of us.
No, I believe what the evidence suggests. That's what I believe.
Yeah.
Like for me, atheism is not a belief; it's a conclusion.
Oh, I agree with that.
That's interesting. Do you think? Don's like Don. You're like a rifle. You throw a thought out there and then you just end. You got to babble a little more.
I'm sorry. I'm having a hard time hearing you because I'm traveling.
Gotcha.
I don't want to miss my SWAT, but your show is always on when I'm freaking traveling.
Pretend you're your daughter and just babble. Okay. That just say. How would Avery say this in many more words than necessary?
I think
is that what your wedding vows are going to be?
Oh.
Ooh. Anyhow, so that's interesting. So you think atheism do you think atheism is the right conclusion?
Well, I think that the evidence is more in favor of that because there are a lot of religions, and you think if God was the creator, imagine the amount of waste that God created. Very, very minute fraction of the of the cosmos has anything to do with him your beliefs in him and the believers that he wants to send a message to, but there's these enormous cosmos outside of that.
Well,
why would there be a God that would be so wasteful?
Let's just do the math, okay? I read a book once called Probability 1. Of course, 1 being 100% and 0 being 0 and anywhere in between. And so if you just made up a number and said that, because there's a billion some stars in the galaxy and there's a trillion galaxies and as a result, there's X number of planets, and of course they're now realizing there's exoplanets all over the place, that if you do the math, even if the likelihood of life arising on the Earth was only so infinitesimal, there's still going to be lots of other planets that would have life on it with the same odds of of independent creation or sui generis arrival of life. So wouldn't it be interesting when or if we find that there are other life forms in space? Do we have to go ahead and say, well, wait, because here's the whole reason why dogs don't go to heaven originally. In some biblical interpretations, in some religions, people say dogs don't go to heaven because they don't have a special relationship with God, because only human beings have the special relationship with God. So if there are other sentient beings, people capable of free will like we are and understanding themselves, assume that they exist, to say that we're the only ones who can go to heaven because we have a special relationship with God, where the hell are they going? Nowhere. Or to hell or somewhere else, because they don't have a special relationship with this all-knowing, all-powerful creator. So probably saying dogs get into heaven is a better position to take should we ever meet any extraterrestrials, because by default, I guess we're saying that all of God's creations get into heaven, and that becomes a little more inclusive. So maybe we're just getting ready for first contact here.
Although, unfortunately, there's nothing in the Bible. I don't know, I missed the first part of the show, but I don't know of any. I've tried to Google this all day. There's nothing in the Bible about animals going to heaven. There's nothing in there. There's creation when God created animals, and really, my understanding of He created animals to like feed us and amuse us. They weren't really put here as something of themselves. They're something for us.
Yeah, they're for us to eat their flesh and ride their backs.
Consume, for us to consume.
Plus, we also remember, God actually mandated that you had to slaughter animals as a sacrifice to Him. I wouldn't imagine it. He would have you sacrificing his special creation, although he came close, right, to telling, was it Isaiah or Ezekiel or who was supposed to kill his son?
I mean, I think if you want to have a religion where you can do supernatural afterlife things with your pets, you should become a Hindu.
Well, you can become your pet. I am.
Well,
or Jains. I guess the Jains, they also are very animal friendly.
I am Hindu. Yes, yeah,
I think too, when we talk about our dogs and stuff, all we're doing is projecting our earthly life into what we perceive heaven to be, because we don't know any better. I mean, like, no one's been to heaven and come back that can say, hey, yeah, right, it's just like Earth, but really cool, or, everyone's nice to each other. No one has that exact experience. Well, and we can only go by what we experience, and we have dogs. We love dogs. We want to hope that our dogs are with us. But, it doesn't, and I love my dogs, but it doesn't make, we have nothing to go on but what we experience. So, of course, we want our dogs to go, but, like, I think you had said this earlier, where do you stop? I mean,
mollusks,
our dogs,
snails,
yes, but not...
Oysters, clams,
yeah,
Rockefeller.
Exactly.
I hope they have clams Rockefeller in heaven. Wait, let's see. Wait, my dog died. He's dead. So let's see. Let me ask him. Bark if you're in heaven. Okay. Yes, he's in heaven.
I just heard it.
He's in heaven.
I
heard him. So the internet goes all the way to heaven. It's hard to believe, but it does. Long story short, this also touches on something earlier where. So here's one of the questions. If your brother, we'll use the mother-son analogy. Let's say your son is an unrepentant sinner, murderer, and goes out in a murder-suicide. So you're pretty sure he's in hell. And then you die and you go to heaven. And you go, where's my boy? Well, according to the people on the internet today, you're not even going to know he's your boy or be concerned by the fact that he's not there anymore, because you can't have negative, bad feelings in heaven. So under that scenario, I'm going to go to heaven knowing that my son is in hell as his mother or father, and have no regrets, no sadness over that whatsoever. And I'm kind of saying, like, that still doesn't work. I can't fathom that you forget you had a son, you forget that he's in hell, his damnation is no longer your concern, to the point where God strips it from your memory, or you just decide that his internal gnashing of teeth is, what he's deserved, and it's your son, but, no redemption's fine with me. And so I thought people so easily believe that, but at the same time, they're sure that they're going to know their pet when they're in heaven.
Well, it just goes to show you, religion is really whatever you want to pretend it is.
Well, Don, we know you're our new token atheist.
Religion is different than faith, though. Obviously, you know that. And religion is man-based. They make, they've made the rules, and rules are made for certain reasons, just like letters in the Bible and were written for certain people.
Right.
Faith is something different that you can't. Like, I don't really like to argue it because it's too personal. I'm not trying to change anyone. I'm just trying to, live my life the way I hope I'm supposed to and be nice and stuff. And, I don't quote the Bible. I don't know the Bible as well as probably, I know I don't know it as well as Brian is today. And Carl, you quote a lot of stuff. I can't. I don't quote the Bible. I just know what I've learned, and
I usually misquote it, but I usually take it out of context. It's
I don't think you're missing much. I haven't read Harry Potter either, and I don't feel like I'm missing anything.
But the Bible does have a lot of good stuff in it. I mean, it has a lot of good principles, whether you believe in God or Jesus or not. I mean, if you take whatever you don't believe in, you just get the basics of it. It has a lot of good stuff in it, the way people should treat each other. And, that's what I try to get out of it.
Well, here's what I'm going to do, guys. I'm going to wrap up the show, but because in the first half we played my mother's little interview, I'm going to replay her to take the show out in case somebody's just joining us or catching the second half, so that they can hear her views on whether dogs get to heaven, what's going on in the IRS, and all that stuff. So my mom's like, I hate when you ask me these opinion questions. I don't want to take a strong position, and then somebody comes back and says, oh. I'm like, come on, Mom, just get in there and do it.
We love Mom. We love your mom.
Do it. Just get in there and do it, Mom. What did I ask her during the thing? I said something about, well, the deer are going to give me the stinky eye. And she's like, huh? And I'm like, the stinky. I'm like, I said, old people called it evil eye. She's like, oh, I get it now. So, yeah, we had a lot of fun with her. Her crops are growing good.
Yeah,
so.
I don't think it came through the first time. Just to let you know.
Oh, so good. Well, then let's definitely play it then, because here it comes. All right, guys, thanks for calling. Right. And here comes
have a good night.
Here comes Mom. Bye, Don.
Good night.
Hey, Mom, how are you?
Hi, how are you?
Good.
What a beautiful afternoon here in Western New York.
So what's going on up there? Anything we need to know about or no?
No, not really. I don't think so. It's just beautiful weather and everybody's enjoying it.
Who is going to be the next governor of New York State? Is there any consensus on that yet amongst the people?
Well, because the
Absolutely. And so even... Hey, Mom, how are you?
Hi, how are you?
Hey, Mom, how are you?
Hi, how are you?
Good.
What a beautiful afternoon here in Western New York.
So what's going on up there? Anything we need to know about? Hey, Mom, how are you?
No, not really. How are you?
Good.
Beautiful afternoon here. Beautiful weather.
Or maybe here it doesn't. Who is going to be the next governor of New York State? Is there any consensus on that yet?
I don't think so. Just beautiful weather and everybody's enjoying it.
Who is going to be the next governor of New York State? Is there any consensus on that yet amongst the people?
Well, because the Democrats have 2-to-1 registration.
Try it again. Why, oh why can we not make this thing work tonight? I do not know. Hey, Mom, how are you? It just doesn't want to work.
How are you?
Good.
Beautiful afternoon.
I guess we're not going to hear my
New York.
mom. So what's going on up there? Anything we need to know? Well, I'll put that up as a separate bonus.
No, not
track.
Really. I don't
so
think
that's the way we're going to have to do that because
it
is just not behaving. Who is going to be listening to Rominger Radio 717-916-5189 amongst people? Again, 717-916-5189. And tune in every Wednesday from 7 to 9 p.m. and every Sunday from 6 to 9 p.m. And I imagine we'll get you here on the air and we'll see where everything goes. Dissatisfaction. Hey, Mom, how are you? What's going on?
Hi, how are you?
Good. Mom doesn't want to play. An active investigation. Because Mom got shy on us. Investigation. Mothers will do that, So, all right, guys. Hey, Mom, how are you?